Esmeralda took the loss of her twin sister extremely hard. She missed her so much and would never have her back. After a few months of mourning, Joseph expected her to return to work. She now had to do the work of 2 children because she didn't have her sister here to endure the labor anymore. She thought her father would have warmed to his other children after the loss of Francis, but he only fell deeper into depression and drank alcohol from the moment he woke up to the moment he fell asleep. She thought she was alone in this world before Francis passed away. And now she truly was. Francis was her one lifeline throughout her life. But she could no longer lean on her for support and love. It broke her heart. Joseph was even more absent in the children's lives than before, so Greta was forced into caring for the younger children. She felt annoyed by their constant woes about missing their sister. Death was inevitable, and they would have to get used to it. The children didn't understand. Clyde was lost in all of the grief and despair. He got little attention for the first time in his short life. His grandmother was too preoccupied with the twins. Joseph had never felt so low before. He felt like he was cursed to lose all of the ones he loved. His only solution was to hide away from his family, so they wouldn't also be taken by the Grim Reaper. It was a lonely existence, and he had to protect his family from having the same fate as Kathleen, Mia, and now Francis. He clung to his substances as a way to cope with the world. Greta became tired of the twins' constant crying. She would sneak away and read a book so she wouldn't have to be near them. The twins found ways to cope with the loss of their sister by comforting each other. They didn't need anyone else. Joseph would only be around his beloved Clyde when Greta would specifically ask for help. His heart would swell with pride during the small interactions he had with his heir. This would always turn into a heavy night of drinking because he missed his boy. That child was his family name's future, and he had to stay away from him if Joseph wanted Clyde to live long enough to take over the farm. Greta kept the house tidy. It was hard for her to be warm towards the children, but at least they could live in a clean home. As the twins got older, their similarities began to dissipate. They were becoming their own individual person. Isabel enjoyed music and liked to play on the xylophone. The pretty sounds brought her joy. Victoria did not care for music and found it annoying. She liked to work with her hands. She was fiercely independent and wanted to do everything when she grew up, but knew that would be tough since she was a female. Esmeralda could feel her sister's spirit the most when she milked their cow, Grace. She knew how much Francis adored that cow, so she took extra care of the animal to honor her sister. Even the cow seemed sad at the loss of Francis. Esmeralda continued to complete schoolwork even though her father didn't allow her to be educated. She and Francis made a pact to be educated women, and she wanted to do that for her sister since she would never get to. Joseph prayed to whatever God was out there to lift this curse on him so he was able to be a present father to baby Clyde. He begged for no more loss for the Bennett family. Joseph had never felt so alone. He spent much of his time outside with the deceased. Greta was counting down the days until she was able to go back home. She had already raised her children, and both of them had preceded her in death. She was free from maternal responsibilities and did not want to raise her daughter's children too. She wasn't a maid, nor was she a nanny. Joseph would have to snap out of the depression he was in and be a father to his children. Greta was leaving at the end of winter, whether Joseph was ready for her to or not. She had no plans on returning because she didn't like her grandchildren. After months of mourning her twin, Esmeralda had an epiphany. She realized that she had a purpose in this household. Both her mother and her auntie were gone, and her father might as well be. She needed to be a stable figure in her siblings' lives. She would keep their home tidy and be a constant source of love and compassion for her younger siblings. By doing this, Esmeralda hoped that it would help her heal from her own trauma while also shielding the littles from experiencing any more. She put on a brave face in front of her sisters and brother. She planned to lead by example so that her siblings felt safe enough to be their own people. The opposite of how her father parents. Greta's parting gift for the younger 3 children was baking her world-famous birthday cake. The twins were aging into children and Clyde was aging into a toddler. It's a woman's duty to bake an exquisite birthday cake. Esmeralda placed the candles on the cake and made a wish. She wished her siblings to have safety, stability, and most of all happiness during this next phase in their life. The fiercely independent Victoria is first to blow out her candles. She wishes for independence from her father and freedom for girls like her. Victoria's childhood trait is bad-natured. This means she has an unpleasant temperament. Her aspiration is to master both her mind and body. She is a very determined child and will do everything in her power to make things go her way. The baby of the girls, Isabel, was next to blow out her candles. She was much more timid than her sister and did not like her grandmother holding her. Isabel's childhood trait is moody. This means she will have many mood swings. Her aspiration is to be an artistic prodigy. It was supposed to be musical genius. Whoops. The sink broke before Clyde could blow out his candles. Joseph refused to repair the sink, so Greta begrudgingly did so. She was so happy to be leaving the Bennett household and away from these whiny children and lazy man. Joseph refused to repair the sink because he wanted to be the one to help his heir blow out his candles. Baby Clyde had lived through another life stage, and for that Joseph was grateful. He still had to have a drink in his hand to calm his nerves, of course. He did what he could to be there for his son. Clyde's toddler trait is silly. This will surely displease Joseph. Isabel tried her hand at learning the violin. She would often have meltdowns due to not learning fast enough, but she was determined to be proficient. It would look good to potential suitors when she was of age, and it would please her father. Clyde enjoyed to play with his toys instead of being out in the fields observing how the family business is done. He's just a kid and wanted to enjoy the things that made him happy. Esmeralda dealt with her grief in silence. Sometimes she would lay in Frances' bed and cry. The bed still smelled like her. She missed her more every day. She tried to talk herself up because her twin wouldn't want her to be sad and miss her. Frances would want Esmeralda to pick herself up and live her life for the both of them. She would want her to be happy, however that looked. Victoria enjoyed to read about mischief, much to her family's dismay. She had such a determined mind, so she got her way regardless of her father or older sister's thoughts towards it. Victoria was going to live her life for herself, not by the rules of others. On particularly difficult days, Esmeralda would sit by her sister's grave to give her the strength to keep going. Now that their grandmother had returned home, Esmeralda was the younger children's only source of parenting. She tries to be patient and compassionate with her siblings. Clyde was very receptive of Esmeralda's decision to be the maternal figure of the household. He adored his sister so very much. Esmeralda was helpful in calming down Isabel when she went through her tantrums. She found her sister's words of encouragement very comforting during times her mood was elevated. The two had become close during the years since Frances passed. Isabel could never replace Frances. They both knew that. But their friendship was a source of stability they both desperately needed. The one sibling that did not like their sister's constant hovering was Victoria. She didn't like Esmeralda being in her business or trying to control her behavior. Victoria didn't want to be tamed by anyone, but least of all her older sister. She often ridiculed Esmeralda in hopes that she would just go away. Esmeralda didn't falter because she cares. This caused even more problems between the girls. Their family dynamic turned difficult. Esmeralda baked her own birthday cake because her father didn't bother to remember her special day. She was dreading this birthday because it was her first one without Francis. Esmeralda's teenage trait is determined, so she will continue to try to successfully get through to her siblings. Her aspiration is to be a mother. Although she had other ambitions, she wanted to be a great mother like the one she had for a short while. Esmeralda kept up with her studies. Her father did not keep books at her education level in their house, so she would purchase them when she was out at the market. She hid the books away so her father couldn't take them away from her. Joseph would soon begin searching for a worthy man to court her, so her time for learning may be limited. Victoria often acted out emotionally by throwing paint and other materials all around the home. She was angry, but did not have a reason. Joseph started to write all of the eligible bachelors in the area. Esmeralda was his oldest daughter and held a special place in his heart since Francis passed away. Because of this, he would find an age-appropriate man for his little girl. The inquirer's name was Thaddeus Lockhart, but he was not inquiring about himself. He was inquiring about his son, Richard, who was the same age as Esmeralda. Thaddeus told Joseph that he and Kathleen grew up together, so keeping their families aligned was crucial. Joseph asked about the price of Esmeralda's dowry, to which Thaddeus named a price that Joseph was more than happy with. They agreed that Richard would soon dine at the Bennett residence. Thaddeus thought about his lost love, Kathleen, and hoped it would please her to know that her eldest daughter was in the gentle and earnest hands of his son, Richard. Joseph returned home to share the great news of Esmeralda's courting. Esmeralda had been dreading this for weeks because she knew her father would take the highest bidder, not the nicest man for her. Although Esmeralda was pleasantly surprised that her betrothed was her age, she was still unhappy that her father would not allow her to choose her own husband. She would be the one living with this man for the rest of her life. Joseph refused to budge, so her hands were tied. She would marry Richard whether she liked it or not. Days later, Esmeralda is forced to cook the dinner that will seal her own fate. She has been practicing her cooking skill to be a good wife, but now wishes she didn't. She was so angry with her father for having complete control over her life's decisions. She desperately wished she had more of a say in the happenings in her own life, or at the very least, was allowed to meet Richard before being told he was courting her. Joseph pours wine for he and the guest of honor, Richard. He was eager to meet his daughter's future husband. Richard arrived early, so Esmeralda did not have time to put away her books. She panics that both Richard and her father will take the book from her. The dinner goes quite well. Esmeralda does not find her future husband unattractive, so that is a good start, she supposed. Richard makes a great impression with Esmeralda, and he spots the book and says that education is very important. After dinner, Esmeralda and Richard sit in the living room so supervised talk together. The twins volunteered to make sure that the betrothed teens are respectful. The more that she spoke with Richard, the more she liked him. He was very intelligent and witty. He seemed to have a good head on his shoulders. He was easy on the eyes too. Esmeralda may have a crush. Joseph speaks to Richard after everything to gauge Richard's first impressions of his daughter. Richard is very happy with this arrangement and is happy to continue with it. Esmeralda and Richard say their goodbyes, and she finds herself flirting with him. This was a great sign for what was the newly courting couple, Esmeralda and Richard, would often sneak to the edge of the Bennett land to share forbidden embraces. Joseph had forbidden them to spend any time together unsupervised, but the couple could not stay away from one another. Their romance blossomed so much since that first dinner together. It was very soon in their courting that she had fallen in love with Richard. He was so tender-hearted, educated, and everything she wanted in a husband. Victoria became jealous of her twin sister because of her talent with the violin. She couldn't allow Isabel to be better than her at something, so she also practiced the instrument. She was awful. Now that Esmeralda was old enough to court, Joseph trusted her enough to watch over and care for his precious heir. She adored her little brother and her heart hurt for him. She and her sisters were at the mercy of their father, but so was he in other ways. Clyde also did not have a say in what he wanted to do for his future. He was destined to become a farmer like their father since before he was born. His life was already laid out for him. Esmeralda did not enjoy the house chores that came with being the eldest. She loved to be a mother hen towards her siblings, but doing the duties of a housewife was not yet her responsibility. She kept her mouth shut because her days on the farm were now limited thanks to Richard. He was her saving grace that was going to get her out of this house. She loved him for it. She just wished that she was able to whisk her siblings out of there with her, but she knew her father would not. Clyde was the future of the farm, and the twins were simply to more paydays for Joseph. The world was an unfair place. The voyeur of Francis' passing has grown tolerable to Esmeralda, but she would sometimes visit her sister's grave and weep because Francis was missing out on so much. Since Esmeralda was confined to the duties inside the home, Joseph initiated the twins into the caretaking of the animals. Isabel obeyed her father's every word, unlike Victoria, so she did most of the work. She liked the animals, fortunately. Clyde stumbled upon his sister's dollhouse one day, and playing with the dolls brought him such joy. Joseph noticed he was playing with the dolls and got very upset. He told his son that it was unacceptable for boys to play with dolls. Clyde begged his daddy to make an exception for him because he had so much fun. Joseph refused this outright and yelled at his son to be better, to be the son he wanted. This made Clyde cry, and this interaction caused their family dynamic to be difficult. Joseph asked his eldest daughter to sit down with him one day to discuss the next steps in she and Richard's courting. He was very stern with her about saving her purity until her wedding night, or she would not be a good wife to Richard. She assured her father that she would save her wifely duties until marriage. She gushed about how happy she was with her father for choosing such a wonderful boy for her to marry, and thanked him profuse. Eli,